Hello, this
Hi.
is Primo Orpilla from Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Um, Apparently you don't need a visa to do a presentation. I would first like to start off by thanking the folks from WorkTech to invite me down there. I apologize for not making it down there today. I really wanted to be down there in Brazil. But anyway, we're going to do this virtually. And I would like to first start out by showing you a little bit about our work, our practice up here in San Francisco. So let me go to the next image, and it's a small video, so I'll let that play. Okay. Caroline, should I go ahead and talk? Oh, shit. Okay. Hold on a second.
Can you move to the next slide?
Yes, sorry.
Who's moving it?
Okay, so that's a little bit of the Silicon Valley. I just wanted to show you our office and our practice, give you a sense of what our practice looks like, and the work we do is going to be extremely sort of different. You see the process there. But first, I wanted to bring up this initial slide because these are current articles on the newsstand today. It's very clear that the workplace has become the focus of a lot of companies. And when you see it showing up in business magazines, the Atlantic Review, there's just a lot of interest in the way we work today. So the contemporary workplace is changing. So I only put these images up to illustrate that thought. The next slide is a really interesting quote, which I think sort of solidifies the importance, especially here in the West Coast, where we're competing for talent, where the employees are changing generationally to millennials. The quote reads, "If you're a Google staffer and your name is Sergey Brin, the odds are work is nicer than home." And that's true in a lot of respects. We just look 5 or 6 years back, and this is the typical workplace that you would see in the Valley. Actually, it's still done this way throughout the United States, perhaps both coasts, New York, San Francisco, LA has more contemporary workspaces, and we're starting to see changes throughout the middle of the United States, but it's still primarily this. We have hard wall offices, we have cubicles, and we have conference rooms. The next slide sort of represents this pivot or this change. The first slide in the upper corner is actually Steve Jobs and Pixar right here in the Bay Area. One of the main concepts in his facility is that there was a central lunch and meeting space. There were no other coffee break areas. There was this one large room called the atrium, and everybody would essentially meet there 3 or 4 times a day. So it caused parts of the company, maybe animators, to meet with engineers, so they weren't so bisected into different parts. The next image to the right is of Mark Zuckerberg's office in Palo Alto. This is the first headquarters that we actually worked with them on. And the idea there is don't overbuild, be very simple, be very mindful of spending money. So we used a warehouse, and we actually utilized all the warehouse docks, elements of the space to create a very fun atmosphere, but not overly designed. And then the lower left corner is Marissa Mayer of Yahoo. I think it's an interesting point in time. They're in the news, especially because she took away the telecommuting practice, so the workplace strategy no longer includes working from home. And you'll find quite often that structures will reorganize and have a different workplace strategy in order to sort of bring the company together. So I see this more as a move for her to bring the company together. So the telecommuting is stopped for this point in time for Yahoo. The next slide illustrates how we might break down hierarchical structures in office space. This is a very typical office in the United States. It's usually heavily officed on the perimeter, lots of offices in the interior core. This is actually for a client up in Redmond, Washington. You could probably guess this is Microsoft. This was part of a Workplace 2.0 pilot program that we participated in. So I'm going to show you how we begin to break down hierarchical structures in offices, which leads to the contemporary workplace, how we want people to meet and collaborate. A lot of the companies in the West, in the East, in the Silicon Valley, the whole idea is that they can innovate and collaborate, and I'm sure you've heard that term many times before. So here is an example of beginning to breaking down the hierarchical structure of the office. We begin removing offices off the window line. You can see that the interior core is now opened up. The areas that are shaded in green are actually kitchenettes. So we bring all the food and the sort of central meeting spaces to the center of the building, and we also put areas like the library, which are designated as more quiet spaces that are in the open plan. In this next slide, we actually describe the many different topologies that we see necessary for contemporary workplace to be successful. I'm sorry, it went one ahead. Going back. So if we start from left to right, we can see that the individual work areas are still around. We still have cubicles, we still have hardwall offices, although we're doing a lot less hardwall offices and we're doing more open plan. So If you can see open plan, these are cubicles, these are hard wall offices. This is shelters are a space that we like to have in interiors. They're not quite a hard wall office or a conference room, and they're not quite a lounge space. There's something in between. They'll have a shelter built around it, and I'll show you those images soon. Think tanks, again, they are smaller, intimate spaces that are typically made with furniture. So we want to create furniture can now surround you. Town hall is a very big part of our design. It is the welcoming, it's the big kitchen, it's the gathering space. They're the most sort of signify what a company's about. The town hall is very representative, so we now do them very close to the lobby. Workshop is a place that you actually will, sometimes you're going to need some time away from the your computer, from doing stuff on the internet or anything on the computer. We want you to have things where you do with your hands. So working in a tool shop, working on your bike is very important. So we provide spaces like that. Anywhere is the idea that any hallway, any transitory space is usable. We want people to take, if they have an aha moment or they have an idea, we want them to be able to write that down. So you'll see in a lot of our spaces, whiteboard, an ability to get into technology real quickly is a part of that anywhere concept. Studios is the idea that people like to work standing up. So a lot of the conferencing and meeting spaces today are very low, very desk height. We see that people want to move and they want to have quick meetings. So studios represent that. Library is the idea that in an open plan, it can get very noisy. So we want to designate protocols and areas where you work quietly. So the library is a very important feature. Living rooms is the idea that casual conversations and a living room type setting often lends itself well to more informal conversation. So we don't want to have so many formal conference rooms that it dictates the conversation or the talk in there. We want to have a lot of these living rooms as well, because we know that inspired talk usually happens in relaxed environments. The war room is still the conference room. We still have to have private meeting space. They've just become slightly changed in the way they work. Sometimes they're used longer periods. You can check them out for periods of time where you can do long ad campaigns. So I'm going to move to the first topology. And you don't need to use all these topologies at once. You can use variations of it. You can use fewer or more, but we have our own metrics on how many of these you need. So town hall is the first one. And real quickly, this is Yelp. I don't know if they have Yelp down in Brazil, but Yelp is a big community of online people that can actually write a review on a restaurant. So we thought that what would be very, very kind of a part of their community and representative of their community is to create this merchant type lunch area. So the coffee bar to your left rotates. It will change coffee makers once a quarter, and they will typically be people who subscribe to Yelp. The other openings over here, they'll have a burrito shop or a cupcake shop or a sandwich shop, and they'll rotate. So this is a modern lunch area, break area that can also convert to a meeting hall. The next slide is of Cisco. This is Cisco's new facility in San Francisco. You can see the lunchroom or this all-hands area feels very much like a residence. It feels like a big kitchen table that's very welcoming. The finishes and the details are almost like a kitchen that you might see in a contemporary home. And then this is Giant Pixel in San Francisco, and this is their all-hands area or town hall, and they like whiskey. They like to have their events around happy hour. So we made the town hall feel very much like a speakeasy or a bar. And this is also got plug and play. There's wired. There's data ports that go to the television, to the monitors. It's all Wi-Fi, so you can actually work down here. And they actually have lots of events down here. The next concept is the library. And the library, essentially, when you have open plan and you are putting 120 people in 120 square feet per square footage in a building, you want to be able to have areas where there are quiet zones. So we designate these quiet zones right off the open plan, and the idea here is that you don't do very, very noisy work here. You do very quiet, heads down work. A lot of these libraries are not stocked with library books, but maybe Kindles. But the concept is that you will work quietly in these areas. So we try to make them feel, in this particular case, this is Giant Pixels. This is not Giant Pixels. This is Quid. The founders of this company went to Oxford University in England, and they love the library there. So we recreated that library. And if you look here, this is all wallpaper. These are the actual books, wingback chairs, to have that library feel. So we want these spaces to be very deliberate, have a very sort of a authentic look, so they're depicting the actual use. This is Cisco's new facility, and their library is in a sunken living room. It's very intimate. You can see that you can go down below. It's screened with glass, and you can see where the open office is adjacent to that. So the next concept, which I described earlier, the workshop, is the idea that when you're working 24/7, 365, and most of your time is spent on the computer, you need sort of the analog version of that. And the workshop is our version of that. We want people to work on their bikes or work on things with their hand. The idea is that you step away from the computer and you will do something more manual. So this is a bike shop. This is at Microsoft up in Redmond, Washington. We branded bikes for the building. We gave them areas and tools along this bench so that they can actually work on their bicycles. And you'll see people down here all the time working on their fancy bicycles. The next shop here, or shot here, is actually adjacent to that. This is called the garage, and the garage is a place where employees are allowed to do work like personal work. So they have a 80-20 rule at some of these companies, where 80% you're working on company work, and then if you want to develop something for, let's say, your personal website, or you want to develop something for your kid's school project, you can work here and be the managers, and the people will understand that you're working on a personal project and not to bother you. It's sort of the separation of work and these personal projects, but you can still bring it to the workplace. The next slide is sheltered, and this is that topology that we talked about that actually is not quite a piece of lounge furniture in a hallway, but it's actually and not a closed hard wall office or a conference room. It's in between. So they look very much like this. This is, sorry, go one more back. This is actually made out of, if you've seen flaps on a warehouse door that keeps cold air from blowing in and blowing out, this is that material, and we just put it on a metal rod, and they call this the meat locker, which it almost looks like refrigeration panels in a meat locker, but you can duck in real quickly. You don't necessarily need to close or open a door. You just kind of push through these screens. Sort of another way to meet. Conversations more relaxed. This is at Square in San Francisco, and the idea here is that these little rooms don't have doors on them. They're actually lined with this industrial felt, and you go inside there, and the sound gets absorbed in this fabric here. There's a piece of glass on the other side, but people like to work here. People like to have meetings here. You could work individually here, but they're a nice alternative to your standard conference room. The next one is, this is at Cisco, and they actually had yurts in their old office. So how could we sort of bring back some of the elements that they like to have in their old workplace to their new? So these are actually contemporary yurts. You can see there's various size openings. This is very open, and then this one is somewhat closed. And then down here, there's just a single entrance. You can see that there's acoustical insulation on the interiors. A lot of people will just duck in here. You can see just reading a book, or they'll meet and they'll conference here. Just another variety of places to work are what we find are very useful in the contemporary workspace. So the next area is studios, and the idea that people like to work sort of in a slightly standing position is the concept here. We notice that even in workplaces up here, people like to come to our office, and they love drafting tables. They love that sense of being able to stand up, do something. So this is Samsung, and this is essentially this is where they design all the U.S. Appliances to go into the market for the U.S. consumer. So you can kind of see what we're talking here. They've got washing machines, refrigerators here, and we want this very studio-type atmosphere with these high tables. Feels like a design studio. This is actually Yelp, and you can see we've got your standard desk, we've got your standard conference table, and then right here in the back here, this is actually my son, and this is the facilities manager's little children. They're sitting at that high table. So you can kind of see the different type of work settings we have in this one photograph. And then the next one is this. People sometimes like to sit at a bar height table. So here's here's a shelter, and here's the high table that you'd see in a shelter. This is actually Reputation.com in San Carlos, California. Individual work areas have changed a bit. We are seeing a lot less cubicles. We're seeing a lot more open plan. This is, a new way of working that you probably are incorporating in your strategies. We do it almost exclusively here in the Bay Area. Cubicles, we don't see too many cubicles anymore. We see more of these types of stations that are open. You can see this is probably a 30 by 54. This is at Microsoft. This would typically be a hard wall office on the window line. These are essentially where the the walls would come down, and now we've lined them up with open cubicles. So we let that light come in to the building. The next slide is of the individual work areas. This is in Microsoft. These are little coding pods. They are individual workrooms, and you can see that they're very small. They're about 6 feet deep by 8 foot wide. Okay, so they're 6 by 8. It's enough for a table, side chair, and you can actually back up. These tables go sit to stand. We have a whiteboard. We have tack board. So it actually works well. These stations you cannot stay in for more than a week. You only get to check these out for a week. Otherwise, you need to go back to this plan. So this is where you normally would work, and the other office is actually where if you need to do some heads down coding work, you'd get access to these types of stations. So the next area are think tanks. Think tanks are smaller conference rooms. They are meant to fit 2 or 3, at most no more than that. The idea is that we have lots of smaller meetings these days. We don't have a lot of 15 to 20 person meeting rooms. We meet individually, so we need to provide many more of these types of rooms. This is actually Yelp, and their room looks like little merchant shops, so we have a very kind of playful look. This is Ticketfly. We actually call these rooms telephone booths. You can see an individual sitting there. You can fit 2 people there. Very, very small in size, probably 5 by 5. Sometimes the room really doesn't have to be a room. It could just be an area in the building where we've cut this. This is actually at Cisco, and you can sit in this. It's almost like the cube you saw at Square, where the sound is absorbed by the material, and you can actually sit there and work quietly. The next idea, the war rooms. The war rooms are still around. We have conference rooms. We call them war rooms, just a different take on it. This is actually at Facebook. This is Mark Zuckerberg's private conference room. You can see we're using acoustical material, actually recording studio foam on the top. This is very, very heavily whiteboarded. The next slide is of Climate Corp. Very transparent. We want employees to feel like they know what's going on in the company, so the idea of transparency in these conference rooms is very big. This is right adjacent to the lobby, interesting story. This is an actual computer of the Earth. So it actually rotates while you're in the lobby and shows you true weather patterns. The company's called Climate Corp, and their whole model is that they map the Earth's weather and they use that data for farming. So this is AOL. AOL, it's all about connecting their different sites. So you see a screen here, you see projectors. There's 4 projectors in here, and all of this is whiteboard. And it's adjacent to the lobby, so people can see in, they can see what's happening. They want the idea that people know what's going on, to share that. The concept of living room is, when you think about working in the living room at home, you kick your feet up, you're very relaxed. The idea that we want this to happen in the workplace is nothing new. We just want people to feel more comfortable. So the living room are really the informal spaces. So here's the main lobby. Feels very residential, almost hospitality. Feels like a hotel. And a lot of people travel, they like to work in hotel environments, they like to work in nice lobbies, so why not bring that aesthetic to the workplace? So this is a fairly new concept for Cisco, but it's something that we see quite often in a lot of our other startups. This is, our living room setting, adjacent to coffee bar and bakery bar. You can see little tiny meeting spaces, and then this is actually a really cool game room that that we have there. Sorry. So the living room aesthetic is very popular. In fact, we do not use a lot of contract furnishings. We may get residential grade furniture for these areas so they feel comfortable and residential in nature. Here's another example. This is Giant Pixel, and they have right adjacent to their work area a nice living room setting. So you're working, but you also have this very comfortable setting in which to hold meetings. Obviously, we could put a fireplace there. We don't do fireplaces all the time, but in this particular case, we did because we were on the top floor of an old building in South of Market. Anywhere is the concept that you can make any hallway, you can make any part of the building usable. So if you have outdoor space, if you have hallways, we like to make sure there's whiteboards available, there's technology available, even little window areas. We look at these at all opportunities for people to work, to socialize. We spend a lot of time at work. We want to make sure that, and it's very expensive. Rents in the Silicon Valley are very, very high, so we want to make sure we use every inch of the workspace. So this is at Open Table, a online booking for reservations at restaurants. This is their new headquarters we just completed. This is again at Cisco. We have access to outdoor. We have very good weather. So why not turn these outdoor spaces? This is an amphitheater that actually people can do presentations from, or you can just hang out and work. There's Wi-Fi. There's plenty of furniture. We just want to show that every part of the office space is usable and available to the employee. They're feeling, oops, sorry. Go back. The idea that they almost feel residential in grade. This is this is essentially close to a break area, but we make the seating very familiar. We make it feel almost residential. If you make a coffee area and you actually design it well, you'll get a lot of people using it. And the idea that you can use these areas as well as your workstation. Here's your workstation, but you can come work over here. You can get a cup of coffee. These amenities or these things are very important in making the whole floor plate work. The idea that any hallway, this is at Facebook, we built these little cushioned boxes or crates that you can actually move around. So we wanted these to move anywhere, but they're available for you to sit at if you'd like to sit in the hallway and meet with somebody at work. This is in Palo Alto. This is the common area of a building called 395 Page Mill. Again, we make sure there's plenty of seating. We make sure there's sorry. We make sure that there's a whiteboard. We make sure that there's lots of seating, places for you to work anywhere is what we're trying to make sure happens in these spaces. And then the idea that you can work on a staircase. Sometimes we have vertical campuses. Not every campus is 55,000 feet on one floor plate. Sometimes they go vertical. These are this is at Evernote in Silicon Valley, and they are on separate floors. So we needed to create a space that felt very easy to have a meeting on. Actually, you can present from right here, and everybody sits on these stairs. And there's actually a monitor right in this area here. So we're using every inch. We're not just putting staircases to get people up and down. We're actually want to have many, many uses for them. So in conclusion and finishing up, I'd just like to, this image kind of illustrates that all these different points are places for people to meet or congregate or socialize. And at the end of the day, these workplaces have to have these varieties in order for people to do the creative work that they do. So I'm trying to illustrate the idea that work happens everywhere in the building. It just doesn't happen at your workstation, and we want to allow people to be able to bring that work back. So you have to have spaces that connect to technology, and the idea is that the entire floor plate is your workplace. So with that, thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I can answer them because we're working virtually, and I can respond to them in real time. Thank you very much.